So here we are, 6.3, and I'm going to call this A because I would imagine we'll end up with another video in elementary algebra, and this is more on factoring trinomials. Okay, so at this point, we factored trinomials that, well, we had a couple different options here. We had one type that looked like this. And we just did this, and this, and this, and we found two numbers multiplied together give you 12, added give you 7. So see, I've done this enough that I can kind of do this in my head. Oh, there's a plus sign right there. All right, so we did that. The next option we had was some like this. Okay, when we did it that way, we factored out the 3, and we are left with that, and then we factored it into two binomials, 3 and -1, so that when we multiplied 3 times -1, we got a -3. When we added those two, oops, see, I made a mistake here. Sorry about that, guys. Let's do this over again. I do that sometimes. All right, let's try it again. X and X, and I know it's a 3 and a 1, but I need to get a -2. So -3 times 1 is -3. -3 times +1, or -3 plus 1 is -2. So there was my answer. So that's what we did in 6.2. Now we get to 6.3, and we're going to make another challenging way to do these. And sometimes you're going to get problems like this, where the number in front of the x is not 1. All right, so before when we did this, if we had like a 3x squared plus 6x plus 9, it made it easy because we would take the 3 out. And then we ended up with factoring something here that had a 1 there. So what we did is even when we had a number, if we could factor out and get that to be a 1, then it made life easier. That's not the case here. With what I have shown right there, I can't factor a 6 out of this or this. So I can't reduce this or anything. I'm kind of stuck with it. So there's a new way of doing this. Now, in the olden days when I learned this, we learned how to do this through trial and error. And I think we learned that way because I don't think my teacher knew there was another method of doing this. Because if he would have, hopefully, he would have showed us. But he didn't. So we would spend hours doing these using trial and error. And the book talks about trial and error at the beginning of the section, but I'm going to skip that because I don't know why anybody would do it trial and error when there's a method in order to do this. So, because I'm concrete sequential and I like to have a list of rules, that's what we're going to do. So the first step in order to solve this is we take the first times this one. 6 times 2 is 12. Now, if this would have been a negative, it would have been 6 times -2 and given me -12, but it's not. So 6 times 2 is 12. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find two numbers, multiplied together give me 12, added together give me 7. So 12 and 1, nope, they don't give me 7. 6 and 2, add those together, nope, no 7. 3 and 4, multiplied give me 12, added give me 7. I like that. So I'm going to make a change here. Everything else is going to stay the same, but I'm going to change this to a 3x plus 4x. Because when I add those, it equals 7, right? So I'm just changing what it looks like. All right, now what I'm going to do, next step, put parentheses. So I'm going to group these two, and I'm going to group those two. Then I'm going to look at this one parenthesis and factor. What can I factor out of there? Well, I have a 3, okay, because this is 3 times 2, and this is just 3 times 1. So I'm going to factor a 3 out, and well, wait a minute. I can factor out more than a 3 because I have an x here and an x here. So I'm going to factor out a 3 and an x, and I'm left with a 2 in here and an x, and I'm left with nothing over here. So I put a 1. Remember, you factor that out, there has to be a 1. So if I were to multiply this 3x times 2x, I get my 6x squared back. This times 1, and I get my 3x. So I'm not going to go over this too much. We already went over it a couple lessons ago. And I'll do this in blue. I'm going to do the same thing here. I have a 2 that's common. And what does that leave me? 2x plus, I took the 2 out of there, leaves me with a 1. Now remember when we were grouping, those had to be the same. And if those were the same, I could take whatever was not in parentheses and put it in its own. And whatever doubled that was in parentheses, here and here, make it its own. And guess what? I'm done. So, not really hard. But, although it's not really hard, there's a lot of things going on here. Okay, so let's look at example 3. I'm outside on my deck and it's starting to rain. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to hang out here. But anyway, let's keep going. 4x squared minus x minus 3. Okay, remember step 1. First number times the second number gives me a negative 12. Two numbers multiplied together to give me negative 12. What are they? There's a lot of them. I think that's it. Okay. And add up to give me negative 1. That one. So let's substitute that for the negative 1 here. So 4x squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 3. Because this equals that. Okay, now, if you remember when we were doing this grouping junk before, one of the things that we didn't like is for that to be a negative. So remember I said if we can, we're going to move things around so that that negative isn't here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch these around. I mean, you don't have to. You can leave them as is and deal with the negative, but I'm just flipping them around so that the negative 4 comes first, because it's the same thing. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. 3 minus 4 is negative 1. So it doesn't really matter which one you use. But I like this middle sign to be plus if I can. Now, it isn't always going to happen. But if it can happen, I sure as heck want it to happen. All right, so let's see. We're going to group that. And we're going to group that. We see we don't have to deal with the whole negative thing because I have a plus sign there. Okay, so let's look at this one here. What can I pull out? I've got a 4 that's common to both, and I have an x that's common to both, leaving me with that. And remember, when you take everything away, you still have to have a 1. What do I have common here? I've got a 3. And what am I left with? Okay, these are the same, so I write them one time, and then I put what's not in parentheses in their own parenthesis. And lo and behold, I'm done. Okay, let's go to example number 3. Let's see if we can make this one work. Okay, so first thing you want to do is try to factor these if you can. Try to pull stuff out of there to make it simpler. So I have what's common to all those. I have a 2. If I pull a 2 out, I've got a 6 there, got a 5 there, and I have a 6 there. All right, I also have y's that are common to all 3 of these. So I pick my lowest exponent on my y, which is the y to the first. So I pull that out, which means I have 2 there, I have 1 there, and I have none there at the end. Okay, so I pulled that out, but I still didn't make that a 1 yet. So now I have to try this new awesome way of doing things. This 2y is just going to drag along. So let's just go ahead and write it down here. All right, so again, multiply that times that, and I get 6 times negative 6 is negative 36. So 6 times negative 6, oh gosh, 36 and negative 1, negative 36 and positive 1. Ooh, there's a lot of these. Negative 9, 4, 9, negative 4, 12, negative 3, negative 12, positive 3. Now, as I'm going down here, I'm going to look and see, do any of these add up to give me a positive 5 yet? Oh, yeah, right there. So I could have stopped a while ago. Those add up to be 5. So again, I'm going to write this as 6y squared plus 9x minus 4, or I'm sorry, that should be a y. Golly, that could be confusing, huh? There. Okay, so those add up to be positive 5y. Now, problem that I see here right away is this middle term here is negative. I don't like the negative there. So I'm going to take that and switch it with this. So I'm going to move the negative 4y over here and the positive 9y and move it there. Now, sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just not going to work. But if it is going to work, I sure as heck want to do it. Okay, now I'm going to group those two and see what happens. So the 2y just tags along. Whoops. What is common with these two? A 2 and a y. Okay, I'm going to make another kind of a square looking just to keep it separate because I've got a couple different groups in here. So 2y. And what am I left with? Yeah, let's just make that 2y. Gosh, I'm starting to sound like my old nerdy professors in college who used to do all this and talk to themselves. All right, so I pull a 2y out. What am I left with? A 3y, because I pulled a 2y out of there, so I'm left with 3 and a y. And the 4y, I just have a 2 there, right? Because I pulled a 2 out of there, and I pulled the y completely. Plus, look at this one. What do I have common? I have a 3. What do I have left? Whoops. I have a 3y left, right? 3 times 3y is 9y, so that gives me that back. Okay, so factored out a 3. And also factored out a 3 here, leaving me with a 2. Again, these are the same. So I have 2y plus 3, and then 3y minus 2. Ta-da! There, I'm done. Okay? So lots of stuff going on, but it's not that terrible. Now, I didn't do it the way the book does it. I did not do the basically the trial and error guessing part. I did the factoring the trinomial by grouping. So that brings us up to example 4 that I'll get started in the next video, 6.3b.